When Jessy handed over the last coins in her purse to her own sister-in-law, she wasn't just paying rent. She was paying for the right to live in a falling-apart trailer while the rest of the family watched her collapse with a smile on their faces. Freshly divorced and with 2 daughters to feed, Jessy was told that this rusted wreck on wheels was everything a woman in her situation deserved. But what no one in that small town could have predicted was that the trailer everyone called junk would hide, in just 90 days, a secret that would change the destiny of 2 families forever. What happened on that sidewalk one ordinary afternoon, and what was discovered in the most unexpected way, left an entire town without words. If you believe that fate writes straight through crooked lines, hit that subscribe button right now, and don't miss what comes next. Every week on this channel, we tell the stories that prove life's best chapters are never the ones you planned. Now, let's begin. The house on Birchwood Drive had been theirs for 11 years. Jessy knew every corner of it, the kitchen drawer that stuck in humid weather, the loose tile by the back door that clicked when you stepped on it just right, the particular creak of the 3rd stair that she had learned to step over in the middle of the night when the girls were small and sleeping light. She had painted the girls' bedroom herself, twice. Once lavender when Lily was born, once a soft yellow when Lily decided at age 7 that she was done with purple. She had planted the rose bush by the front gate the spring after they moved in, and had watched it grow wide and unruly and fragrant every June for 11 years. She left the rose bush behind. She left the kitchen table they had bought at an estate sale in 2016, the one with the scratches on the left corner that she had always meant to sand down. She left the living room curtains she had chosen herself from a catalogue on a winter afternoon when the catalogue had been the most pleasant thing happening in the house. She left most things behind, because most things were purchased with money she did not have and a life she was no longer living, and because Jessy Hart was the kind of woman who did not take what was not hers, even when what was not hers had been built on the back of years she could not get back. There was a dignity in leaving clean. She had decided this early, and she held to it. She was 42 years old. She had a 14-year-old daughter named Emma, and a 9-year-old daughter named Lily, and a rolling suitcase and 3 boxes and a checking account with enough in it to cover the last month's rent she owed on a house she was leaving, and nothing beyond that. The divorce had been finalized on a Wednesday. By Friday, she was packed. Daniel had left 6 weeks before the paperwork was final, had packed 2 bags on a Tuesday evening with the systematic efficiency of someone who had already decided and was now simply executing the decision, and had gone back to his mother's place in Clarksburg, 12 miles away, with the ease of someone returning to a place that had been waiting for him all along. He had not offered money beyond what the settlement required, which was not much, because Daniel had always been better at spending money than at earning it, and the settlement reflected what there actually was rather than what Jessy believed. In the quiet and accurate accounting of 11 years there should have been. He called the girls on Sundays sometimes. He had called Emma and Lily 3 times in 6 weeks. He had not called the previous Sunday, which Emma had not mentioned and which Lily had mentioned twice, and then gone quiet on in the way of a 9-year-old who has learned that some things are better set aside. Jessy did not think about Daniel more than she had to. She had made that decision consciously, the way she made most decisions, by identifying what she could control and directing her attention there. She could not control what Daniel did or did not do. She could control what happened next. What happened next was the problem. She had been out of the workforce for 9 years. This was not a failure or a mistake. It was a choice she had made with Daniel's full agreement when Lily was born, and the cost of childcare exceeded what Jessy would earn at the administrative assistant position she had held since she was 25. She had left that job willingly with a plan, and the plan had been that she would return when Lily was in school full-time, and that the years at home would count for something when she did. The years had counted for something. 2 daughters who were healthy and well cared for and loved, but they had not counted for much on a resume, and the job market in Millfield, Tennessee, in the year she found herself 42 and newly single, was not overflowing with opportunities for women who had been out of it for nearly a decade. She had applied for 4 positions in the 2 weeks before the divorce was final. She had heard back from one, been interviewed over the phone, and been told politely that they had decided to go in a different direction. She was working on it. She would keep working on it. But working on it did not solve the immediate problem of where she and Emma and Lily were going to sleep on Friday night. Her mother was in assisted living in Nashville, which meant that option did not exist. Her sister was in Oregon, which was too far and too expensive to consider in the short term. Her friends, The ones she had kept through the years of the marriage, which were fewer than they should have been, because Daniel had a way of making her feel that her friendships were a kind of disloyalty, were sympathetic, but had small houses and their own complications. It was Emma who heard about the trailer. Emma was 14 and had her father's dark eyes and her mother's practical mind, and she had been listening more carefully to the adult conversations around her than Jessy had realized. She came to Jessy 3 days before the move-out date and said quietly that she had heard Aunt Renee mention a trailer on their property that was sitting empty. Renee Caldwell was Daniel's sister. She was 3 years older than Daniel, married to a man named Phil who sold insurance and coached youth soccer, and she had never made a secret of the fact that she found Jessy an insufficient match for her brother. The feeling was mutual, though Jessy had spent 11 years being professional about it. Jessy called Renee on a Tuesday evening after the girls were in bed. She had waited until after the girls were in bed because she did not want them to hear the conversation, and specifically because she did not want them to hear her asking for anything from Daniel's family. There was a version of this situation in which she did not call Renee, in which she found another solution, but she had looked at the other solutions and they were not solutions that worked within the timeline she had. So she called. Renee picked up on the fourth ring with the tone of someone checking who was calling before deciding whether to answer. The tone said that she had considered not answering and had decided for reasons of her own to answer after all. When Jessy explained the situation, briefly, without asking for sympathy, without framing it as anything other than the practical facts it was, there was a pause on the other end of the line that contained several things Renee did not say out loud, things Jessy could feel through the phone the way you feel the weight of what is not being said. Then Renee said the trailer was available. It was on a piece of land they owned on the edge of town, where Phil had thought about building a workshop. It was not in the best condition, but it was available. Jessy asked what the rent would be. The number Renee named was not a rent, it was a statement. It was the number you named when you wanted to make clear that you were doing someone a favor they had not earned, that you were extending charity to someone who should be grateful, that the person on the other end of the line should understand their position relative to yours. It was 63 cents a week, 63 cents, payable in advance. Jessy understood exactly what the number meant. She said she would take it. She drove out to the trailer the next afternoon, alone, before she brought the girls. She wanted to see it first, wanted to have whatever reaction she was going to have in private, where it would not land on Emma and Lily. The trailer was 60 feet long and had been at some point in the past 2 decades white. What it was now was a kind of pale gray-brown that happens when white things are left outside in Tennessee weather for long enough. The aluminum siding had separated at one corner, leaving a gap that let in wind and whatever else wanted to come in. The steps to the front door were concrete blocks arranged in a stack that was technically functional. The small yard around it had not been maintained and had become a landscape of tall grass and determined weeds and a rusted lawn chair that had given up. Inside, a smell of closed air and old carpet, and something faintly animal that she hoped was historical rather than current. A kitchen with a working sink and a stove where 2 of the 4 burners responded to encouragement. A bathroom that was complete in its components, if not in its aesthetics. A main room with carpet the color of a mistake. 2 small sleeping areas at either end. Jessy stood in the middle of the main room and looked at it for a long time. She thought about the rose bush on Birchwood Drive. She thought about Emma, who had heard about this place through the careful listening of a teenager who understands more than she lets on. She thought about Lily, who would find a way to make this an adventure because Lily found a way to make most things an adventure, and about whether it was fair to a 9-year-old to require that level of adaptability. She thought about 63 cents. Then she took out her phone and wrote a list of what needed to happen first. The list had 11 items on it. 3 of them could be done that day. She started with those 3. That was how Jessy Hart had always worked, not by looking at the whole distance between where she was and where she needed to be, which was sometimes too large to look at directly, but by identifying the first 3 things that could move her in the right direction and beginning with those. It had gotten her through the early years of the marriage when money was short, and Daniel's optimism about his prospects consistently outran his actual prospects. It would get her through this. The following morning, she met Renee in the driveway of the property. Renee was wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky and carrying a coffee she had not offered to share. She looked at Jessy with the particular expression of a woman who expects a performance of gratitude and is prepared to receive it. Jessy counted out the coins from her wallet, 63 cents exact. and placed them in Renee's palm without a word. Renee looked down at the coins. Then she looked at Jessy. "It's what someone in my situation can afford," Jessy said quietly. She took the key from Renee's other hand. "Thank you for the trailer." She got in the car and drove to get her daughters. Emma, when she saw the trailer, was quiet for a long moment. Emma processed things quietly, had done so since she was small, taking information in and holding it before she responded. Jessy had always respected this about her older daughter and had learned not to fill the silence prematurely. Then Emma said, "What color are we painting it?" Something loosened in Jessy's chest. Lily, 9 years old and constitutionally incapable of the silence her sister employed, had already gone up the concrete block steps and was inside, reporting her findings back through the door with the energetic narration of someone conducting a tour. "Mum, there's a closet. Mum, the faucet works. Mum, there's a window in the back that looks at a tree." They moved in on a Friday. 3 boxes, the rolling suitcase, 2 garbage bags of additional items, and a laundry basket containing the things that had not fit anywhere else. Emma carried her own box without being asked. Lily carried the laundry basket in a way that required multiple trips and considerable determination. That first night, they ate peanut butter sandwiches on the floor of the main room because the table would not be delivered until the following week. Jessy had found a used one online for $18, and it was coming from 2 towns over on Thursday. They sat in a circle with a battery lantern in the middle because the overhead light in the main room had a bulb that needed replacing, and Jessy had not yet had the chance to buy one, and the lantern was warmer anyway, its light smaller and more specific than the overhead would have been, the kind of light that makes a circle rather than filling a room. Lily said the sandwiches were the best sandwiches she had ever had, which was not true, but was the kind of generous and instinctive thing Lily said when she understood that someone needed it. Emma, across the circle, caught her mother's eye with the particular look she had been giving Jessy since she was about 11, the look that said, "I understand more than I'm saying, and I'm choosing not to say it, because you do not need me to say it right now." Jessy had always loved her daughters. In this moment, in this circle of lantern light in a trailer that smelled of closed air and old carpet, she felt a quality of that love that was new and specific and would not leave her. Lily said it was like camping. Emma, across the circle, caught her mother's eye. A look passed between them that was not about camping. It was about the specific understanding that passes between a mother and a daughter who is old enough to know the truth of a situation and has decided consciously to meet it the way her mother is meeting it. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds, and it said everything that did not need to be said. "It is like camping," Jessy agreed. The first week was the hardest. Not because of the trailer itself. The trailer was manageable, a set of practical problems to be identified and addressed, but because of the invisible weight of starting over in a place where everyone knew your previous version. Millfield was a small town. People had known her and Daniel as a couple for 11 years. People had opinions about the divorce that they expressed in the particular small-town way, which was not directly but through tone and timing and the things that were not said. She felt it in the grocery store, in the way conversations shifted slightly when she appeared. She felt it when she ran into Daniel's friends, who were polite in the manner of people who have chosen a side. She did not have time to dwell on it. She was too busy. 2 women who lived 3 streets over, neighbors of the property, older, a retired teacher named Gloria and her sister Diane, who had lived in Millfield her whole life, knocked on the trailer door on the 3rd day with a plate of cookies and an offer. They needed help with house cleaning weekly. They paid a fair rate. Was Jessy interested? Jessy was interested. She cleaned Gloria's house on a Tuesday and Diane's house on a Thursday, and the money she earned those first 2 weeks went toward paint. She had asked Emma and Lily what color. They had debated this with the seriousness of people making an important decision. Emma favored a deep teal, Lily wanted yellow. They compromised after a negotiation that Jessy let proceed without intervention, because watching her daughters negotiate a problem was one of the things that reminded her what the years at home had built. The compromise was teal on the main body of the trailer, with the door and the window frames in yellow. On a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after they moved in, Jessy and Emma and Lily painted the trailer. It took all day. They wore old clothes that they did not mind ruining. Lily's shirt had a painted handprint on it before 9 in the morning, origin unclear, and they played music from Jessy's phone propped on the concrete block steps, and they painted with the rollers and brushes Jessy had bought at the hardware store the previous afternoon. The work was physical and repetitive, and satisfying in the specific way that physical, repetitive work is satisfying when the result is visible. Each stroke of the roller changed something. Each section completed was a section that would not need to be done again. Lily required significant supervision around the yellow portions, particularly the window frames, where her application technique prioritized enthusiasm over precision. Emma, working on the upper sections with the extension roller, was methodical and precise, and covered the surface in overlapping passes that left no gaps, and Jessy watched her from the other side of the trailer and felt the particular pride that is not about accomplishment but about character, the pride of seeing who someone is revealing themselves to be. This daughter was going to be fine in the world, more than fine. By late afternoon, the trailer was teal and yellow, and entirely different from anything it had been before, and Lily said it looked like a beach house, and Emma said it looked like something someone had chosen, and Jessy stood in the yard with paint on her hands and her arms, and a streak of teal in her hair, and felt, for the first time since the day the divorce was finalized, that she was building something rather than losing something. She took a photograph, not for anyone else, for herself, to remember what this day had looked like. The idea came from Lily, which was how several of the better developments in Jessy's life had arrived, unexpectedly, and from the direction she was least watching. This was not unusual. Lily at 9 years old was the source of a significant volume of ideas, the majority of which were impractical in the specific way that 9-year-olds are impractical, not from lack of imagination, but from an incomplete accounting of logistics and cost. The impractical ideas she had learned to receive with appreciation and redirect gently. The inspired ones she had learned to recognize because they had a different quality to them, a simplicity that was the opposite of naive, the simplicity of something that is actually straightforward once you see it. The idea about the hot dog cart fell into the second category, though Jessy did not recognize this immediately. They had been at the Saturday farmers market in the center of Millfield. Jessy was looking for produce because the farmers market was cheaper than the grocery store for fresh vegetables, and she had become, out of necessity, very efficient about the grocery budget. Lily had stopped in front of a food stand and was observing with the focused attention she brought to things she found interesting. "There's no hot dogs," Lily said. Jessy looked at the market. Produce, baked goods, a candle maker, a woman selling handmade jewelry, a man with jars of local honey. No hot dogs. "People like hot dogs," Lily said, with the conviction of someone speaking from personal experience. "They do," Jessy agreed, moving her along. But she thought about it on the drive home. She thought about it while she was making dinner. She thought about it that evening when the girls were doing homework, and she was at the small table with the notebook where she kept her budget and her job application notes and the running list of things that needed to happen. She had the trailer. It was already distinct. The teal and yellow paint job had made it visible in a way that a grey-white aluminum box was not. She had a kitchen with a working stove. She had, from the fictional work, a small amount of savings that was not earmarked for anything yet. She had time in the mornings before the girls came home from school. She had, she realized, the components of something. She researched that night and the following 2 nights. The county food permit process was more straightforward than she had expected, though it required an inspection and a fee that would take most of her current savings. The equipment, a basic steam table, tongs, a cooler, a folding table, could be assembled second-hand for a manageable amount. The farmers' market had space available for vendors on Saturdays. She called the coordinator and was told the fee for a season spot was affordable. She made the numbers work. She was good at making numbers work. It had been one of the things she had done for 11 years inside the marriage, managed the household budget, stretched what they had, kept track of what needed tracking, and the skills had not gone anywhere just because the marriage had. She told Emma first, the way she told Emma things that were significant, to get the response of someone who would be honest rather than simply supportive. Emma listened to the whole plan. Then she said, "Who makes the best hot dogs you've ever had?" Jessy thought about this. "Your grandma," she said, "at her backyard parties, the way she did the onions. Can you make them like that?" "I can try." Emma nodded slowly. "Then try," she said. The permit process took 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, Jessy tested recipes on Gloria and Diane, who were willing and enthusiastic taste testers and who had opinions about condiment options that were detailed and specific. She refined the caramelized onion recipe until it was right. She found a second-hand steam table, in good condition, being sold by a restaurant that was closing in the next town over. She built the menu, simple, focused, the things that people actually wanted Rather than a complicated offering that would require more than she could manage alone, she named it Jessy's. Not because she lacked imagination, but because she had found in the years of running a household that the simplest name was usually the right one. The first Saturday at the farmer's market, she sold out of everything by 11:30 in the morning. She had not planned for this. She had planned carefully and conservatively, had estimated quantities based on the market's reported foot traffic, and had brought what she calculated was more than enough. It had not been enough. The line had built steadily from the moment she opened, and by 10 o'clock she had understood that the calculation had been wrong in the right direction, and by 11 she had been rationing without advertising that she was doing so, and by 11:30 the last hot dog was gone. She stood behind the table at 11:45 with an empty steam table and a line of people who had arrived too late, and a feeling in her chest that she recognized, after a moment, as the feeling of having made something work. Not perfectly. She had run out, which was a problem to solve, but genuinely in the way that matters. The thing she had made was good enough that people wanted it and came back for more of it. And that was the only feedback that actually told you anything true about what you were doing. Lily, who had come with her that morning to help, was telling the people in the remaining line about the hot dogs with the promotional enthusiasm of someone born to the role. "She's going to make more next week," Lily told them. "She makes the onions from scratch. You're going to want to come back." Peter Callahan first appeared at the farmer's market on a Saturday in late September, 6 weeks after Jessy's had started operating, and he was not mysterious. He was a large man with sawdust on his work boots, and the particular look of someone who has been working since early morning and has decided at 10:30 that he deserves a hot dog. He ordered 2 without looking at the menu board for long, the decisiveness of someone who has been making quick decisions all morning and has no interest in slowing down for a hot dog stand. He paid with exact change, which Jessy noted as the habit of someone who knows what things cost and comes prepared. He stood to the side, away from the line so as not to block it, and ate with the focused appreciation of someone who is actually tasting what they are eating rather than consuming it automatically. He was not on his phone. He was not looking around the market at other things. He was eating the hot dogs and paying attention to them, which was, Jessy had come to believe, the best thing a customer could do. Then he came back to the front of the line. "These are the best hot dogs I have had in this county," he said. "The onions especially, what do you do to them?" "Low and slow," Jessy said, "and a little patience." "I'm going to need to know more about that at some point," he said. He wasn't flirting exactly, or if he was, it was the unpracticed flirting of someone who has spent 5 years not doing it and has not regained the fluency. He was mostly just being direct in the way of someone who does not have time for indirect. "Come back next Saturday," Jessy said. He came back the following Saturday, and the one after that, and by the 3rd Saturday, he was arriving early enough to be second in line rather than 6th, which required planning. They talked while she worked, brief exchanges because she was busy and he seemed to understand this, about the town, about the market, about the practical logistics of running a food stand that she was working through in real time. He was a carpenter. He worked independently, doing renovation work and custom furniture, and the ongoing repairs that old houses in old Tennessee towns perpetually required. His truck had his name on the side, Callahan Carpentry, and the truck was a Ford that had been maintained with the care of someone who depended on it. His wife had died 5 years ago. He mentioned this not as a bid for sympathy, but as context, the way people mention facts about themselves that explain other facts. He had 2 daughters. They lived with him full-time. The younger daughter was 9, her name was Emma. Jessy stopped what she was doing when he said this. "My older daughter is Emma," she said. "She's 14. He looked at her for a moment. "My older one is Lily," he said. "She's 12. They both were quiet for a second, absorbing the particular strangeness of this coincidence, the way the names had traded places, as if some larger arrangement were making a point. Then Jessy laughed. It was the first real laugh she had produced in some time, the kind that arrives without warning, from a place that has been waiting for a reason. And Peter Callahan laughed too, the surprised laugh of someone who had not expected this morning to contain this. "My Emma is going to find this very funny," he said. "So is my Emma," Jessy said. The idea of the renovation came from Peter, but in the way that ideas come from people who see things clearly. Not as a suggestion he was pushing on her, but as an observation he made one Saturday morning in October when he had arrived at the market and found Jessy dealing with a situation where the steam table connection was not holding properly. He fixed it in 6 minutes with tools he had in his truck. While he was doing it, he looked at the setup. The table, the equipment, the way everything was arranged, with the assessing eye of someone who thinks in terms of structure and function. "You're working harder than you need to," he said, not critically but observationally. "I know," she said. "The layout isn't efficient. If you moved the cooler here and the table there, you'd cut your reach distance in half." She looked at what he was describing. He was right. "The trailer itself," he said carefully. "Is it something you'd want to use for this eventually? Make it a proper stand?" She had thought about this. The trailer was her home, not a commercial kitchen. The two functions were not compatible in their current form. "The trailer is where we live," she said. "I know," he said. "I meant when you're ready to move somewhere else. It might be worth thinking about what the trailer could become." She thought about it. Not that day, she was too busy that day. But in the evenings that followed, when the girls were in bed and she was at the small table with her notebook, she thought about the farmer's market and the customers who came back every week, and the woman from the next town over who had asked if she ever did events, and the man from the church who had asked about catering their fall festival. She thought about what the trailer could become. By November, the trailer had become two things simultaneously: the home she and her daughters were making out of a rusted aluminum box, and the beginning of something larger, not yet transformed into a commercial kitchen that required permits and money and time she did not yet have, but pointed in that direction, oriented that way. She had a notebook page that was a plan, rough and preliminary but real, and she had a name, Jessy's Hot Dogs, that was already known in Millfield, in a way that a name becomes known in a small town when the thing it refers to is genuinely good. Pitter had helped her reorganize the setup at the market 3 Saturdays in a row, arriving early and working with the efficient precision of someone who solves problems for a living. He did not charge her for this. When she raised the subject, he said that she was feeding him excellent hot dogs and that he considered the arrangement balanced. Their daughters had met, which had happened with the inevitability of something that was going to happen from the moment the names had been exchanged. Two single parents with daughters the same age who kept appearing at the same place every Saturday eventually produce an introduction, because the alternative requires an active effort to avoid it that neither of them was making. Jessy had brought Emma to the market one Saturday in late October, when Emma had no school, and had expressed interest in seeing the operation. Pitter had brought his younger Emma, because his older Lily was at a friend's house, and he had not wanted to leave the younger one with nothing to do on a Saturday morning. The two Emmas had been introduced at 9:15, with the particular awkwardness of teenagers, who are aware that adults want them to get along, and are resisting the performance of doing so, while simultaneously discovering that they actually might. Emma and Pitter's younger Emma had discovered within approximately 4 minutes of meeting that they shared a name, a grade at school, and opinions about at least 3 things they disagreed about that they nonetheless found interesting to disagree about. Lily and Pitter's older daughter, whose name was also Lily, had been more cautious with each other. 12 and 9 had more distance than 14 and 13, but they were finding the edges of a friendship. Jessy watched all 4 girls at a picnic table outside the market one Saturday in November, the 2 Emmas arguing amiably about something, the 2 Lilies beside them in a more careful conversation, and she felt the particular quality of a moment you do not want to rush through. Pitter appeared beside her. "Strange," he said, looking at the same scene. "Very," she agreed. "Good strange." "Yes," she said. "Good strange." December arrived in Millfield with the cold that came down from the Cumberland Plateau and settled into the valley with the intention of staying until March, which it did every year, which everyone knew, and which was still every year a mild surprise. Jessy had insulated the trailer windows with the plastic film kits sold at the hardware store, pressing the film tight and using the hairdryer to seal it, a process that Emma assisted with and that they completed in an afternoon. She had found a space heater that kept the main room livable and learned the particular discipline of a small heated space, keeping doors closed, moving efficiently, generating warmth through activity rather than waiting for the space to provide it. She had discovered in the process of managing the trailer through a Tennessee winter that she was considerably more capable at practical problem-solving than she had given herself credit for during the years when someone else had been nominally in charge of the practical problems. The problems had always been hers to solve. Daniel's nominal charge had been mostly nominal, but she had not, until now, been forced to solve them entirely alone, which was different. Entirely alone was clarifying. It stripped away the question of who was responsible and left only the question of what needed to be done. The farmer's market went indoors for the winter, to the community centre on Oak Street, which was less atmospheric than the outdoor setting, but was warm and had reliable electrical access, which mattered for the steam table. Her customer base had actually grown slightly because word of mouth in a small town is efficient, and the thing it was saying about Jessy's hot dogs was the right thing. She had added 2 items to the menu. This was Emma's idea. The older Emma, who had been thinking about it since October, and had presented a case for it one evening at dinner with the thoroughness of someone who had done her research. The additions were a corn dog, which appealed to the younger demographic that came to the market with parents, and a vegetarian option using a plant-based sausage that Jessy had tested and found genuinely good. The additions required minor equipment investment, but the payback had been immediate. She had also quietly been building toward the larger thing. She had spoken with the county small business office about the permits required to operate a food trailer as a commercial unit. The woman there had been helpful in the specific way of county offices that have a process and follow it. Thorough, clear, unhurried, providing the information she needed without editorializing about whether her plans were reasonable. The permits were achievable. The timeline was clear. She had spoken with the farmers market coordinator about year-round vendor status, which was available and which she formalized with a check that represented a significant portion of her current savings and that she wrote with the deliberate calm of someone making an investment rather than spending money. She had spoken with the organizer of the Millfield Fall Festival, who confirmed with uncomplicated enthusiasm that yes, they wanted Jessy's hot dogs at the event and that the rate she quoted was more than acceptable, and who had then given her the phone number of the Spring Founders Day Committee, who were also interested, and the name of the organizer of the county fair, who might be, and the contact for a private event business that sourced food vendors for corporate parties in the region. The network was forming. She had not planned the network. She had planned the hot dog stand, but the network was forming around the hot dog stand the way things form around things that work. She had priced the equipment needed to make the trailer function as a proper commercial kitchen. She had calculated how long it would take, at current revenue plus her cleaning income, to save that amount. The number of months was larger than she wanted it to be and smaller than she had feared. She was working towards something. She could feel the shape of it even when she could not see all of it. Pitta had been helping, not in a way that created obligation or altered the balance of what they were to each other, which was something she was being careful about, something she was letting develop at the speed that felt right, rather than the speed that the loneliness sometimes wanted. He had helped her repair the insulation in the trailer's undercarriage on a Saturday morning when both sets of daughters were at respective activities, working in the cold efficiently and without complaint and refusing payment with the straightforward logic that he had done it in 3 hours and it needed to be done. She had fed him lunch. He had stayed longer than 3 hours, and they had talked about things that were not logistics, about their daughters, about the town, about the particular experience of building a life after having had one that did not hold. He had lost his wife to an illness that had moved quickly and given very little time for preparation. She had lost her marriage more slowly, which was its own kind of loss, different in shape, but not necessarily in weight. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The old life?" She thought about this honestly, the way she thought about things she wanted to answer accurately rather than comfortably. "I miss what I thought it was going to be," she said. "When I was 25 and we were starting out, and I believed the version of things that he described. I miss that version, not what it actually was by the end. By the end, I was too tired of managing the distance between the version and the reality to miss the reality itself." He was quiet, listening, not preparing his response while she talked, but actually listening, which she had learned to recognize as rarer than it should be. "I miss Margaret," he said. "Not a version of her, the actual her, the way she laughed at things that weren't that funny. The way she kept all her lists in one notebook and the notebook was always impossible to find. The specific her," he paused. "That kind of missing doesn't get smaller, you just get larger around it." "That's a good way to put it," Jessy said. "She said it first," he said. "I'm just repeating it." "That's different," Jessy said. "Different loss," he agreed. "Same rebuilding." They sat with that for a moment, in the trailer kitchen that smelled of onions and coffee, and the particular domestic smell of a space that was becoming steadily a home. Outside, the November cold was doing what November cold did in Tennessee. Inside, the space heater was doing what it could. It was enough. The Spring Founders Day Festival was held on the last Saturday of March, and it was the day that Millfield, Tennessee, decided that Jessy's hot dogs was a permanent feature of its civic life. She had prepared for 2 weeks. She had calculated quantities with a precision built from 6 months of weekly data, had pre-prepped the onions the night before in the largest pot she owned, had recruited Emma as her official assistant and Lily as her promotional presence, a role Lily accepted with the enthusiasm she brought to all roles. Peter was there early to help set up. His daughters came with him and immediately found their counterparts, and by 8 in the morning the 4 girls were a functioning unit that managed the logistics of the setup with a competence that made Jessy and Peter exchange a look across the trailer top. The festival ran from 9 to 4. By 9:45 the line for Jessy's hot dogs was 6 people deep. By 10:30 it extended past the candle maker and the honey seller and a local artist who was selling watercolors of Tennessee landscapes. By 11 it extended past 3 vendors entirely. By noon, Jessy had stopped thinking about anything other than the immediate management of inventory and production, the focused state she reached on the busiest Saturdays at the market, where the thinking became automatic and the body did what it had learned to do. Emma worked beside her, with the competence of someone who has been doing something long enough to not need to think about the steps. The 2 younger girls, Lily and Peter's Emma, had appointed themselves the line management team, walking the queue to give people an estimated wait time with the seriousness of professionals. By 1 she was rationing. By 2, the rationing was not sufficient, and she had to begin telling people at the back of the line the honest news. By 2:30 she was sold out, with a line of people who had arrived too late, to whom she spoke personally, looking each of them in the eye, apologizing and telling them she would be at the farmers' market next Saturday. 14 of those people told her they would be there. 3 of them asked for a business card. She did not yet have business cards. She told them she would have them by Saturday. She sat in a folding chair at 3 o'clock, the sold-out steam table beside her, and looked at the festival going on around her, the kids with painted faces, the couples with strollers, the older residents who had come to this festival every year for decades, and who had today tried something new at a teal and yellow trailer that had not been there last year. Peter brought her a water bottle and sat in the folding chair beside her. "You're going to need a second trailer," he said. "One thing at a time," she said. "I'm just observing." "I know." She looked at him. "Thank you. For today." "My daughters ate 4 hot dogs each," he said. "I consider it a fair exchange." She laughed. He laughed. Around them, the festival continued its ordinary Saturday business, unaware that something was quietly being decided in the space between 2 folding chairs. The proposal happened in April on a Sunday morning, in the yard of the trailer, which was by then a yard that Jessy had been tending since October. She had cleared the tall grass in the fall and seeded it in the late fall and mulched the border in the late winter, and planted bulbs in November that she had bought from the hardware store, with the particular faith of someone who understood that some investments pay out in spring rather than immediately. The crocuses had come up in March. The daffodils had followed in April, and the yard that had been a landscape of weeds and a rusted lawn chair was now something that someone had chosen and tended. It was not dramatic in the way proposals are sometimes dramatic. No restaurant, no elaborate plan, no audience of friends waiting around a corner. It was Peter arriving on a Sunday morning with 2 coffees and the particular expression of someone who has been thinking about something for long enough that the thinking is finished, and the only thing left is saying it out loud to the person it concerns. The girls were inside. The yard was the modest rectangle of grass that Jessy had been tending since October, where she had planted bulbs in the fall, and where the crocuses were now pushing through the ground in the particular yellow that early spring produces in Tennessee, small and determined and exact. He handed her the coffee. He looked at the crocuses. He said what he had been thinking. She was quiet for a moment. This was not hesitation. It was the same thing Emma did, the taking in of information before responding, a quality she had apparently passed on. Then she said yes. She said it without the dramatic pause that the moment might have warranted in a different version of events, without the performance of consideration that would have been dishonest, given how clearly she already knew. She said it the way she said things she had already thought through, directly, with the full weight of having actually thought it through. Not because the timing was perfect, or the circumstances were ideal, or because the trailer had been transformed into something grand. It had not been, not yet. The commercial kitchen permits were still in process. The second trailer was still theoretical. The savings were still building toward the number they needed to reach. She said yes because Peter Callahan was a man who had arrived at her steam table on a Saturday morning and eaten 2 hot dogs and come back every week after that, who had fixed her equipment and insulated her floor and sat beside her in a folding chair without needing the silence to be filled, who had 2 daughters named in the wrong order, whose names were a joke they had been sharing since October, and who had never, in all the months of Saturday mornings and Sunday conversations and cold, November afternoons fixing trailer insulation, made her feel that what she was building was insufficient, or that she should be somewhere else by now. He understood, because he had lived it, that rebuilding a life was neither quick nor linear, and that what you needed beside you while you did it was someone who knew how to show up. She said yes because her daughters, when she told them that evening at dinner, reacted in exactly the way that daughters react when something is right. Emma with the slow, certain smile of someone who has reached a conclusion some time ago and is now watching the facts confirm it, and Lily with the volume and specific enthusiasm that Lily brought to all good news, which in this case included an immediate and detailed series of questions about what this meant for the living arrangements, and whether the 2 Lilies and the 2 Emmas would all live together, and whether they were getting a dog. She said yes because the trailer, the teal and yellow trailer that Renee Caldwell had offered as a humiliation, and that had become instead the container of everything Jessy was building, was still there, was going to stay there, was going to become, in the months ahead, the commercial kitchen it was always capable of being, with the permits and the equipment and the second trailer that Pitter had correctly observed she was going to need. The Spring Founders' Day Festival had been written up in the Millfield Gazette, a small piece, 3 paragraphs, with a photograph of the teal and yellow trailer that had been taken by a festival goer and submitted to the paper. The piece had mentioned Jessy's by name, had described the line that extended past 3 other vendors, and had quoted a long-time festival attendee who said it was the best thing that had happened to the event in recent memory. The piece had also, in its final paragraph, mentioned that the business was expanding, that a second trailer was in planning, and that a commercial kitchen permit was pending, in a way that made it sound like the beginning of something rather than the end of anything. Renee Caldwell, it was later reported by people who had been in certain places at certain times and who felt that the information was worth sharing, had read the piece at her kitchen table on a Sunday morning and had a particular expression that was hard to describe precisely, but that everyone who heard the description understood immediately. The coins that had been meant as a humiliation had become the opening line of a story that was not going in the direction Renee had imagined when she counted them into Jessy's palm. Jessy did not read the piece about Renee. She was too busy. Jessy did not read the piece about Renee. She had better things to do. She was at the farmer's market on Saturday, as she was every Saturday. The line was 11 deep by 9:15. Emma was working the table with the competence of someone who had been doing it long enough to know the rhythms without being told. Lily was doing what Lily did, which was engaging the line with a warmth and promotional energy that was entirely her own. Pitter arrived at 9:30, second in line, as had become his habit. She made him his 2 hot dogs. He paid. He stood to the side and ate them with the same focused appreciation he had brought the first time, 6 months ago, when this had all been different and smaller and less certain. She watched him from behind the table and thought about 63 cents, about Renee's expression when she counted out the coins, about the grey-brown trailer that was now teal and yellow and had her name on it, and a line of 11 people on a Saturday morning waiting for what she made. She thought about what the trailer had become in 90 days, and what it was still becoming. She turned back to the next customer and asked what they would like. She knew the answer before they said it. She had been doing this long enough that she could see what most people were going to order before they reached the front of the line. But she asked anyway, because asking was part of it, because the person in front of you deserved to be the one to say what they wanted rather than having it assumed, because that was the difference between a transaction and something that felt like being seen. If you have ever started over with less than you thought you could survive on, if you have ever been handed something meant to diminish you and turned it into something that defined you, if you have ever watched your children help you build something new and understood, in that moment exactly what you were doing it for, this story belongs to you, because Jessy did not just open a hot dog stand. She rebuilt her life, coin by coin, Saturday by Saturday, one customer at a time, and nobody who watched her do it will ever call that ordinary. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the things people give you to diminish you can become the things that define you, that starting over is not the same as starting from nothing. That 63 cents in the right hands is enough to begin. We are deeply grateful you walked this road with us today. We'll see you in the next story.